So, we have 10 Straw Hat Pirates and 11 Blackbeard Pirates, and eventually these two legendary crews will be forced to come to blows. There's just no getting around that narrative. Especially if my theory about God Valley 2.0 is correct, this could mean that a clash between these two crews is just around the corner. And when that happens, we'll get to see each member of the Straw Hats facing off against an opponent on the opposing crew. But as it stands now, things don't exactly match up pretty cleanly. Because as of right now, the Straw Hats are currently down one member with the Blackbeard's 11 compared to their 10. Now, that being said, obviously we could just have a repeat of Enies Lobby, where in the beginning of the fight, we can have Zoro, Luffy, or Sanji facing off against a member of the opposing crew very early on. They take them out without any real effort, and then later on in the battle, they fight against their real opponent. Or it could be that once the two crews finally face off, this is when Kuzan decides to make his move, betraying Blackbeard and revealing his true motives. Either option is entirely possible and very likely, but completely mute when it comes to the point of this video, because in this video, we're going to list off all those who could possibly take the 11th spot on the Straw Hat crew before this fight begins, based on who I've seen the fandom calling to join for the past few years. Starting off with the person I think is the least likely to, yet surprisingly enough is currently in the best position to join, and that is the very first Vegapunk we meet when getting to Egghead, Lilith. And look, despite me thinking that Lilith is the least likely person to end up joining the crew, I do actually like the idea of her becoming a Straw Hat. I mean, she's fun, she's smart, she's cute, she gets along well with the crew, despite often at first trying to kill them, and she's always ready to fight when the situation calls for it, and at times when the situation doesn't, but hey, that's her quirk, every member of the crew has one, so she already fits right in. And since they're leaving Egghead behind and transporting all the Vegapunks over to Elbaf, I could definitely see Lilith out of all the Vegapunks getting bored with the idea of hiding out on the Island of Giants. Because ever since she was introduced, to me Lilith is read as someone who is in constant need of entertainment, which she got plenty of living on Egghead, being able to make new discoveries, invent new things, and experiment to her heart's content. While living on Egghead, she always had something new and exciting to keep her occupied. But once they leave the island, she'll have to leave all that behind and go hide out on an island where, as far as we've seen, is centuries behind all of their technological advancements. Which means no new groundbreaking discoveries, no new technological advancements, no experimenting of any kind, at least not the fun ones. It'll definitely end up being the most boring experience of her entire life. But if she ends up going with the Straw Hats, she'll be able to have all the fun she can handle. Because I mean, what's more exciting than constantly being chased down by the world government and toppling the evil ruling body of every island you visit? Not to mention, her and Frankie would immediately hit it off and begin creating new inventions and ways to make the Thousand Sunny even more of a one-of-a-kind ship. Honestly, if you really sit down and think about it, this is kinda the perfect trade-off for her, because not only does she get to escape being killed off by the world government, but she also gets to go on and have the most fun she's ever had in her entire life. But, like I already mentioned in the video, she is the least likely person on this list to end up joining the crew for two major reasons. Number one, we already have Frankie as our technical genius, so having her join the crew would just be cloning Kim, but you know, a girl this time. And two, it's more than likely that the only Vegapunk that will be making it off Egghead Island with the Straw Hats is Stella. Now I mean, that's not to say that I definitely think she's going to end up dying during the arc, because she could just as easily be picked up by the Blackbeard Pirate ship that's hanging around the island. I just personally think that she's not going to be leaving the island with Luffy and the Straw Hats. Now, moving on to the next person on this list, and this is probably the person I'm going to get the most flack for, but our very own honorary Straw Hat and the person that I and many others wanted to join the crew since she was first introduced, Vivi. In fact, it broke my heart at the end of Alabasta when she decided not to join the Straw Hats and stay behind to help lead her country. But now that her father's been killed and she's on the run from the world government, many see this as the perfect chance for her to officially join the crew. Which I mean, yeah, they're kinda right. Everything that's been going on with this character ever since the reverie began has seemingly been slowly leading towards this one outcome. So if Oda's goal for this character is at some point for her to officially become a member of the Straw Hats, now is the time to do it. All we need now is for her to somehow run into them. Something like, I don't know, maybe Big News Morgan gets word that the Straw Hats are heading to Elbaf. Vivi overhears this juicy bit of information and decides to hijack a ship to go meet up with them. She makes it to Elbaf, she meets them again, some kind of wacky adventure happens, and the arc ends with Luffy officially asking her to join the crew. I could definitely see all that playing out in the next arc, and I would definitely be 100% on board with it. The only problem though with Vivi joining the crew is Vivi's not a fighter. A lot has changed since the last time Vivi sailed with the crew. No longer are they facing off against small-time pirates and captain-level Navy officers. Now they're up against Yonkos and their top dogs, and admirals and vice admirals. At this point in the story, each member of the crew has to be able to handle fighting against a high-ranking opponent, at least at the level of a Tobiropo, which after Nami gains Zeus and Elbaf gives Usopp his long-awaited character moment, each of them should be able to do. But Vivi, even in the early parts of One Piece, she wasn't exactly a fighter, and I imagine that over the past 2 years of her being a diplomat, that hasn't exactly changed. I mean, don't get me wrong, over the past 2 years, she's probably gained a considerable amount of knowledge and skill when it comes to being a diplomat, but none of that's going to matter when they're fighting off against the Blackbeard Pirates if she can't do at least a bit of the kicking and punching. So, unfortunately, even though I would really love to see her join, we have to write Vivi off as the possible 11th member. Next up is someone who is actually in a pretty decent spot to join, and if she ends up surviving this current arc, I could definitely see her joining the crew much in the same way Robin did. And that is former CP0 agent and first confirmed successful clone in the One Piece universe, Miss Buckingham Stussy. Because we know so little about Stussy, I honestly have no strong feelings one way or the other if she ends up joining the crew. It'd be cool if she did because that means we get to know more about her and get to see exactly what she's all about, and totally fine if she didn't. That being said though, I do think she actually is someone who would fit well with the crew's dynamics. And we definitely know that a certain cook would be more than happy to welcome her on board, but to be fair, considering that this entire list consists of very attractive women, I doubt he'd really complain about any of them joining. That being said though, as a CP0 agent, or I guess at this point a former CP0 agent, she more than likely has the strength that I said disqualified Vivi from joining the crew. Not to mention her knowledge of the Marines and how they operate would definitely come in handy during their travels, and her espionage skills would definitely help Straw Hats in gathering information, something I would argue they're not exactly great at. Also, there's really not many options for her at this point because she betrayed CP0, and now because of Lucci, the world government knows about it. So, just like the Straw Hats, she is now a wanted criminal. So, assuming she wants to avoid being captured by the Marines, she really only has two options at this point. Either stay with Vegapunk, or Vegapunks if more than one ends up surviving this arc, and leave with them off of Egghead Island to Elbaf, or travel with the Straw Hats and become an official member of the crew. And while hiding out on Elbaf might be the smarter option because I doubt the world government is ready to launch a full-scale war against the Giants, it's not exactly the fun one. So if she wants to hide out from the world government and have fun while doing it, she might as well go with the Straw Hats. Of course, this all depends on her surviving Egghead, which despite what happened in 1091, she more than likely will. Honestly, I'd say that the only negative to her joining the crew narratively is that she doesn't currently have a connection with any member of the Straw Hats, and depending on how much time is left in the story, there might not be enough time for us to really believe in the idea that she will build up the belief that every member of the crew has in Luffy becoming the Pirate King. You know, that same level of belief that had Nami, despite being completely terrified, willing to face down Kaido for lying about killing Luffy. If you're going to become a member of the crew, then you have to be willing to give your life in the belief that Luffy will become the future Pirate King. And I don't think that Stussy at this point in the story, or at any point depending on how much time we have left, will really get to that level. Which is the same thing I could say about the next person on this list, fellow member of the Worst Generation, Jewelry Bonney. Just like Stussy, Bonney has no real connection to any member of the crew outside of what's going on in the current arc, and has no reason to be willing to give up her dreams, goal, and life in order to help Luffy achieve his. So as much as I hate to say it, it would honestly be a huge leap to believe that she would ever want to join the crew. But that being said, Bonney might also actually be the person most likely on this list to actually become Nakama, simply because Oda is obviously setting up for her and Kuma's stories to have some level of importance in the future of One Piece, and the best way to make sure she's around Luffy when that important story beat happens is for her to join the crew at least temporarily. That way we can avoid having to jump through all the narrative hoops and manipulate the story so that these two members of the Worst Generation can come together again, because after Egghead, if these two end up going their separate ways, the odds of them meeting up again before the story ends is 1,000,000 to 1. The same odds I give the next person on this list of ever meeting up with Straw Hats again before the final battle of the series, despite a loud portion of the fandom wanting her to join the crew, and that person is Yamato. Now, despite the fact that I said that the odds of her meeting up with the crew again are very, very low, as the second to last person on this list, obviously I believe that Yamato has a much better chance of joining the crew than any of the people prior to her on it. She meets all of the necessary requirements to become a Nakama, she's strong, she's quirky, she has an already great established relationship with every member of the crew, and Luffy already did extend an offer for her to join the crew when she's ready to leave Wano, so everything's already set for her to join. But I do have some issues with the idea of her becoming Nakama. For one, just like Vivi, I feel like the time for her to join the crew has already come and gone when she turned down the initial opportunity. Not to mention, as someone who was able to clash with Kaido, she messes up the power dynamic even more than Jinbei did when he joined. And most importantly, if she ends up leaving Wano, for lack of better words, they're fucked. Because as of now, neither Momo or any of the Scabbards stand a chance of fending off powerful outside threats. So for now, she needs to stay on Wano to help them out. And here's the thing, Yamato knows that, which is why she chose to turn down the initial offer to join the crew, despite that being her dream and goal throughout the entire Wano arc, choosing to stay behind to help Momo in protecting her home country, which is a choice that the final person on this list never got a chance to actually make on screen. That person being none other than the Electric Bunny herself, Carrot. It's no secret that I was a heavy supporter of the idea of Kara joining the crew. And prior to Yamato's introduction, it really seemed like Oda was setting up for her to set sail with them post Wano. I mean, ever since they first met Carrot, she just naturally clicked with the crew. She became fast friends with every member, she had her own quirky interactions with each of them, and Luffy even bothered to remember her actual name, something he rarely does with anyone who doesn't end up joining the crew. And keep in mind, he didn't even do that with Yamato until they were leaving Wano and saying their goodbyes. And Yamato, again, was primed to join the crew. Not to mention, ever since she met them on Zou, Carrot has been with the Straw Hats all the way up to the beginning of the raid on Onigashima, even being right there with them in the big moment when the crew all finally reunited when Jinbei showed up in Wano, as if she was already a member of the crew. Anyway, basically what I'm trying to say is that Carrot had, and I would argue still has, the best chance of becoming the 11th member of the Straw Hats. I say still has because despite her being basically forced to become the new leader of Zou at the end of Wano, Carrot was clearly not ready to do so. Because not only did she not think she was fit or strong enough for the role, but she also still wanted to honor Pedro's dream like she promised she would. And since she is basically the only named major character we don't see in chapter 1057 saying goodbye to the Straw Hats when they leave Wano, there's still a slight chance that later on in the series she might eventually end up showing back up, although admittedly with each passing chapter, the chances of her showing back up are getting smaller, and smaller.